Part 8 of the Dragon Scourge. The Glow's throat went dry, but he remained silent, just like the new name that the suit came with, all the while wondering what the hell did he get himself into now. The trip to the next city ended all too quickly. The Clove urged his horse a little closer to the rest of the caravan. As he passed the coach, its white curtain moved aside, and a woman's voice called out to him. What is happening, Shadow? I heard you fell. Are you all right? You seem uncomfortable in your saddle." The Clove turned his head to find himself staring down at the most beautiful sky-blue eyes he'd ever seen. "Shadow, are you all right?" the woman repeated. You seem different. Why are you riding so stiffly?" The Clove shook his head and urged the large charger away from the coach. How could everything get so far out of hand, he wondered. The guards at the city gate made way as the knights rode through. Must be nice working for royalty, he thought. They approached an inn, and the Clove veered off and headed into the stable. However, his troubles had only begun. The great black warhorse was stepping about restlessly on the floorboards. All right, you rotten creature," he muttered. "I just want to get off. Take it easy." The horse reared up. "I'll turn you into soap, I swear it," he exclaimed in terror, all the while looking for a good place to jump clear of the agitated beast. Just then, several stable boys came running and grabbed the reins, consoling the creature long enough for the Clove to hop off the saddle and make it safely to the ground. He let out a sigh of relief and leaned up against the far stable wall. And then he realized that the stable boys were staring at him, waiting for his orders. It was then the Clove discovered the heavy purse at his belt. "Are you really the Black Knight?" asked one of the boys. "I thought the Black Knight was a mute," the other said skeptically. "Yes, well, my friends," the Clove said as he pulled out 2 gold coins. "Let's make that our secret, and I'll give you another if you keep it." He tossed each of them a gold coin. Their eyes grew big, and the first boy nodded quickly, but the other said, You aren't really the real Black Knight, are you?" The Clove frowned and asked, "There is more than one?" "Yeah, well, they're just pretending to be him. But there is only one. The true Black Knight fights for justice, and he swears allegiance to no man, only to the greater good, and—" "Oof! Ouch! Jacob!" The lad yelped as the other boy elbowed him to keep silent. "We won't tell anybody, right, Nathan?" he said quickly. The Clove couldn't help but be a little intrigued. He hoped he had not attacked such a righteous warrior in the forest. "Another gold piece if you bring me some dinner, and if anybody asks, tell them I'm tending to the horses," he instructed. He climbed into the stable loft, keeping an eye on the caravan. The nobles and the knights took the best rooms, while the soldiers and the servants crammed anywhere they could. All the horses were settled into the stables. Jacob carried a clay bowl of beef stew and a slab of bread up to the loft, where he remained and stared at the knight intently. I heard you have horrible scars," he said. The Clove frowned. These kids were going to do him in. "Did you also hear that I never show anyone my face unless I kill them?" he growled. Naturally, he had no intent to harm the lad, but watching his eyes grow wide with terror was a little amusing. After the stable boy hurried down from the hayloft, Clove let out a sigh, removing his visor, and began wolfing down the stew and bread. He knew he should have left, but he was tired, and the large helping of stew made him feel all the more sluggish. One moment he was resting in the hay, and the next thing he knew the morning rays were streaming through the cracks in the wooden panels. "Black Knight! Black Knight! Come quick!" The closed eyes snapped open, and he crammed the helmet visor shut and looked down from the hayloft and saw Nathan standing at the stable door. "What's going on?" he demanded. There is a large man with a black mask, and he's kidnapping the princess." Oh. The Clove groaned inwardly and impatiently tried to wave them away. "I don't have time for games. Go ask one of the other warriors, or play hide-and-seek or something," he suggested. "They're all sleeping," Nathan exclaimed. "All the soldiers were drugged. You had to stop them. You're the only one." The Clove cursed under his breath as he threw the saddle onto the horse. "I suppose it's time for me to be leaving." "You can't leave! You can't leave!" the boy cried in panic. "How about this? Let's play hide-and-seek, and I'll give you another big shiny coin if I can't find you after I count to 30 seconds, the Clove reasoned. But just as he began fishing through the money pouch, suddenly he heard a woman's shrill voice call out in distress. Chapter 6. Vice of Virtue. "Let me go! Let me go! I command you!" the princess cried out in distress. The Clove turned in time to see someone being dragged into the barn. Her face was covered by a veil, but the Clove had not forgotten her blue eyes. However, the man in the black mask was a different matter. His hands and arms were covered by scars and burns, and his beard was silvery white. A mighty man of war indeed. The Clove cursed again as he dropped the saddle to the floor and glowered up at the tall brute. All at once, the princess stopped struggling and stared at the masked man standing before her, and then at the Black Knight in the loose-fitting armor. "Shadow? Who?" she gasped in bewilderment. The princess and the stable boys gasped in dismay when the Clove pulled off his helmet and tossed it aside. "Let her go," he growled. The big man's eyes grew wide in anger. He pushed the princess aside and drew a large dagger from his belt and came at the Clove. The pyro had no time to react. The armor was far too big and clumsy. He staggered backwards. There was no time to draw his blade. As he fell back, he grabbed a pitchfork and swung it around, striking the masked man across the side of the knees. The large man, known as Shadow, let out an inaudible shout of pain and sank to the ground. The Clove thrust the pitchfork's prongs towards the masked man's throat, but Shadow was much faster than he looked, and quickly parried the pitchfork away with his dagger. Using the iron prongs to trap both wrist and dagger, the Clove used the staff as leverage to twist the dagger from the large man's hand. Having the advantage of not being weighed down in poorly fitted armor, the masked man quickly sidestepped the pitchfork and gripped the staff with his left. With a tremendous display of power and strength, the large mute smashed the wooden staff in half, over his knee with the closed mouth dropped open in disbelief. But before his opponent had a chance to run him through with the pitchfork prongs, the clove kicked his injured knee. The masked man roared in agony as he rolled away in anguish. Meanwhile, the clove sprang to his feet and quickly discarded the heavy metal plates that were weighing him down, and brandished his sword ready to end things once and for all. But just when he thought he was going to have the advantage, the prince came running into the stable, and when he saw the clove, he drew his own sword and snarled, "Bastard! On guard!" The clove glanced at the prince's sword. He could tell the nobleman's movements were practiced. "So you're the one that set this all up?" The clove accused him angrily. "Yes, I did from the beginning. I don't know who sent you, but you won't stop me." "Nobody sent me, but I'm here all the same," the clove declared, trying to circle around to keep between him and the princess, all the while keeping a wary eye on the large brute who was still struggling to rise. "Matthias, please," the princess cried. "He is trying to save me. Can't you see?" Matthias clenched his teeth and kept his sword angled up toward the yellow-eyed stranger. "No. We are here to save you, Creela," he corrected her. The clove shifted nervously, keeping his eyes on the masked man who was now staggering up to his feet. "Stop this! I'm not going with you, Matthias!" the princess exclaimed. And Matthias shook his head vehemently. "No, you're not going to be a silly girl. Just then the clove attacked the prince. Creela screamed, but just as the clove came at the prince, the masked man pulled a dagger from his boot and hurled it at the pyro. The blade flew true, but the timing was off. The clove cursed as he felt the hilt of the blade glance off the side of his head. Seeing his opponent suddenly distracted, the prince took advantage and lunged. The clove anticipated the move and parried the sword. With a wild right hook, he struck the prince, rending him unconscious on the floor. Seeing the prince fall, Shadow let out a horrible, gurgling shriek and charged at him. The clove turned to face him, but failed to see the princess, who had picked up a large shovel. Wham! She struck the clove from behind. The clove cursed and stumbled forward off balance. The masked man knocked the clove's sword from his hand and elbowed him across the face. But the clove was not soft like the prince was. The clove ducked down and tackled the large brute to the ground, making a good effort to twist the injured knee once more. Shadow snarled in agony and began raining down fists onto the clove's head. However, he was no stranger to fighting on the ground, and he rolled to the side and reared up, throwing in several punches of his own. He ripped the mask from his face and revealing his gruesome battle scars. However, the clove's attempts to finish the fight yet again left him blind to the oncoming attack from behind. "Stop it! Stop it! Both of you, stop it!" sobbed the princess as she whacked the shovel over the clove's backside. "What the hell is going on?" the clove shouted in dismay. Whatever was happening, he no longer wanted any part of it. He pulled himself free and rolled aside to avoid the oncoming shovel. "Take her! Just take her! You can have her! I don't want her! Just get her away from me!" By this time the unrest in the stables had been noticed, and before the clove could make his getaway, the other knights came storming into the stable. "Shadow, you traitor bastard! I'm yourself!" Grun snarled, his voice slurred from the effects of the sedatives, as were the soldiers that followed behind him. Without missing a single beat, the clove ripped the shovel from the princess's hand and struck the Green Knight, laying him out flat on the ground. The clove grinned as he watched the knight crumple like a wet blanket to the floor. He found the brutal fight amusing, but he had his own troubles to deal with. This was not his fight. Hoping Shadow would keep the knights occupied, the Clove recovered his sword, but as he was about to slip out, he came face to face with the Red Knight. "It's you!" The Clove froze in his tracks and stared at the knight blankly. "Me?" he gasped, trying to sound surprised, but Ruketh wasn't buying it. The Red Knight went for his great sword and charged at the horse thief. Tremors rattled the marrow of his bones as their steel blades collided. The Clove cursed as he was forced to retreat back out of the doorway, losing the vital ground necessary for escape. The man in red armor was indeed well trained, and the Clove found himself in the middle of the chaos. In the corner of his eye, he saw Shadow engaging 4 men single-handedly. All the while, the princess screamed for the violence to end. Clove knew if Shadow fell, he would soon be surrounded. Suddenly, to Ruketh's surprise, the fierce yellow-eyed warrior suddenly disengaged and attacked the others. Ruketh attempted to shout a warning, but it was too late. The Clove came up from behind and struck the soldier over the back of the head with the pommel of his sword, knocking him out cold. While he could have easily have killed the man, he was no desire to kill. He just wanted to get away. Taking advantage of the sudden confusion amongst the ranks, Shadow beat down the remaining soldiers with a shovel, leveling each one to the ground. "Get them! Don't let them get away!" Ruketh roared as he led the charge into the barn. As Shadow stepped up to engage Ruketh and his men, the Clove ran over and let the startled horses out of their stalls. They came prancing about in panic in the melee, creating mass confusion and disruption, creating the perfect opportunity for him to finally get away. When, suddenly, from out of nowhere, a heavy bale of hay fell from the loft on top of the Clove, knocking the wind out of him and sending his sword skidding across the floor. Oof! He looked up to see the 2 stable boys about to throw another hay bale down on him. "What the—" he exclaimed, and hurriedly rolled out of the way, picking up his sword. "I want my money back, you little traitorous trolls!" he exclaimed, but just as he sprang to his feet, the Clove noticed that he and Shadow were trapped against the wall. He was about to charge into the line of steel blades when Shadow's black leather glove gripped the flat of his blade, pushing it down toward the ground. Shadow shook his head slowly, telling the young warrior that it was over. The Clove's nostrils flared and his yellow eyes blazed like liquid metal. The thought of losing was just unbearable and made his blood boil. "Surrender? Not in this life or the next," he roared as he pulled back his sword. But Shadow did not let go. The Clove cursed and stared at the battle-scarred warrior with contempt, refusing to yield. Shadow responded with a powerful right hook to the Clove's head. Bearing the brunt of his fist was like getting struck with a hammer. He felt his ears ring and his tongue go numb. His vision blurred, and his eyes rolled back into dark oblivion as his body crumpled to the floor. "Well played, Shadow. I pity you chose the wrong side." Shadow glanced over toward the princess and lowered his head in defeat as the other knights grabbed him and shackled his wrists behind his back. Ruketh shook his head in disgust. "Grun warned us that you and the prince would turn on us, but I didn't believe him. Never thought you would betray us and your king. That's why you fly no pennant. or swear any allegiance. I never thought I would see how dark you truly are inside." He scowled before turning away. "Find Sir Grun a doctor, and bind these three, and bring them outside," he ordered, and the soldiers quickly rushed to do as they had been commanded, while Rukith turned to face Creela. "Did they hurt you, Princess?" Creela shook her head. I'm fine," she said as she tried to dry her tears. "You mustn't kill them," she added. "They just don't understand." Rukith snarled. "Shadow nearly killed Grun, and that creature, that yellow-eyed beast, he's not a beast. He's just a boy. And he tried to stop Shadow from taking me away." "Boy? He's a horse thief, a bandit, a killer. He'd probably wanted you for himself," he scoffed. Creela looked down. "How many men did you lose, Sir Knight?" Rukith clenched his teeth. "Thank God none were killed, but too many were injured. And what about your younger brother? What shall I tell the king if Lord willing is still alive when we return?" Creela let out a heavy sigh. "What my brother did was wrong," she began, "but his heart was right. Some day he will understand. We cannot bring back the dead, Rukith. Let's at least wait until the dust has cleared and we have tended to the wounded before we do anything unreversible." Rukith grunted. There was wisdom in what she said. Well, at least, finding out the information part, anyway. "Your mother would have been very proud. I'm sure the other knights will be anxious to hear what they missed when they are roused from the sedatives put in their ale. I myself am also curious to know more about who sent this yellow-eyed one. He fights like no mere bandit I've ever encountered. For all I know, he could be a spy or an assassin." With that, the club was dragged out of the stables and bound with thick cords of rope. It took a while for the other knights to fully recover, but by noontime they all had been informed of the morning's events. "What? The princess? What happened? Who? Shadow? You lie, Sir Preston!" exclaimed as his squire helped him to don his armor. "Oh, yes, sir," the squire said, "and there was a young villain with him, not old enough to shave. He had these devilish yellow eyes and looked insane. He was surrounded and still wanted to fight. If it hadn't been for Shadow, he would have fought to the death, I'm sure of it." "Yellow eyes, you say? Interesting," Shahid mused. "Lead on. I want to see this for myself." Yellow eyes. While the other three knights were busy getting suited up, Grun was slowly recovering from his head injury. "Shadow, where is he? I'll kill the low-down traitorous bastard," he snarled. Rukith chuckled. "I'm glad you're feeling better. Lucky for you, it was a shovel and not a sword in his hand." Grun scowled sourly as he rose to his feet and stormed over to Shadow, who sat on a large rock, hands chained behind his back, next to Prince Nathias. "You bloody two-faced snake!" he snarled. Without so much as flinching, Shadow stoically rose to his feet, and looked Grun right in the eye. The young prince, however, wasn't so reserved. Seeing Grun and Rooketh, he began kicking and thrashing against his restraints. "You bastards! If it wasn't for that savage, that fiend, we would have been long gone. I should have slit your throats in your sleep," the prince cursed. Rooketh stroked his chin thoughtfully. Both knights looked at one another in puzzlement, and then turned toward Leclove. He was still unconscious and tied to a tree. "Ha! It's just like you to cast your lot with the vile filth," Rooketh told the prince. "You'll be hiring orcs and dark fae next." Creela did mention that he tried to stop them, Rooketh muttered to Grun, nodding toward Leclove. Grun frowned. "This is the same savage who attacked us on the road. Who sent him? Why is he here?" Rooketh grunted and shrugged. "Well, let's ask him," he announced, and signaled one of the nearby men-at-arms to get some water. Some time later, a cold bucket of water to the face brought Leclove back. His yellow eyes snapped open and he gasped and spluttered as he tried to get to his feet, only to find himself tightly bound to the tree. "Who sent you?" came a voice. Leclove's yellow eyes quickly came into focus, seeing all two familiar faces standing above him. "What? No one! Keep the wench! Just let me go!" he snarled angrily. Both knights stared at Leclove in shock and disbelief. But Creela jumped in before all the rest. "You dare refer to royalty this way?" she exclaimed. "Shall I, behead him now or later, princess?" Grun asked. Creela folded her hands and glared at Grun for interrupting. She looked back at the ill-mannered young savage. "What are you? And why did you attack us on the road?" she demanded. Leclove clenched his teeth and turned his head slightly, taking in his surroundings as his tied hands fidgeted behind his back. "Hey, look, the men at the gate started the trouble, and you guys attacked me first. Next thing I know, I saw you being dragged off by that fellow over there, and you were screaming for help. But trust me, I don't know you. I don't want to know you, and I don't want anything to do with any of you. I just want to see the Oracle, so just give me my sword and let me go," he snapped impatiently. When Leclove mentioned the Oracle, Creela's eyes grew wide as she turned to look at Rooketh, who nodded and stepped forward. "You'll take us to the Oracle," he declared. Leclove clenched his teeth. "Give me back my sword first," he growled. Grun smirked as he stepped forward, brandishing Leclove's cutlass. "This type of weapon is wielded by cutthroats, highwaymen, barbarians, and savages. Do you know what we do with those swords, boy? I'll tell you what we do. We string them up on a lamp-post in the middle of town and hang them." The Green Knight paused for effect. "Show us where the Oracle is, and we'll spare your wretched life." Leclove didn't know why, but the sword was very precious to him. It held the key to his past. He would not be parted with it. "I will take you to the Oracle, and then you will return my sword," he announced grimly. While he wasn't entirely sure himself where the Oracle was, he had a sneaking suspicion that if he admitted this information, he would lose his only leverage that he had, and possibly even his life. Grun shook his head. "The Oracle or your life? That's the deal, savage." The clove paused for a moment, as if taking time to actually deliberate over the choice he had. But instead of complying, he responded back in defiance. "Today is a good day to die." The princess gasped and looked at Grun and Rukith in shock. "Hang him high," Rukith ordered. Grun leaned over and whispered to Creela, "Not to worry. He's bluffing. The savage will be more willing to comply after he feels the noose around his neck. It's just a mere tactic, you see." In a matter of minutes, the clove was hauled up to his feet. The clove didn't blink even as the coarse fibers of the noose was pulled over his head. He could feel the breath being stolen away. The gravity of the situation began to weigh heavy on his chest. A taste of fear resided in his mouth and swelled in his throat like a sharp fish bone that he could not swallow. However, it was not the thought of dying itself, but the thought of never knowing who he was that bothered him the most. Had he been good or evil? Was he just a robber like the man in the green armor said? If he was evil, surely he could change. He wanted to do good. Surely he could not have been what they said. There was no denying, even though he had forgotten who he was. His hands and fingers had remembered. He was trained to do battle, to hurt and to kill. Whether it was for good or ill, there was no way of being certain. He had to know, whatever the cost. McClove's yellow eyes misted over. His face went as blank as a corpse, and his flesh turned whiter than a sheet of parchment. Grun stepped up and cinched the noose tightly around McClove's throat, bringing him back from his daze. "Last chance, savage. The oracle or your life," he snapped impatiently. Suddenly there was a gruesome popping sound, followed by the rasp of steel and the metal scabbard. Everyone stood in shock and horror as Clove miraculously freed his hands from the chains. In the blink of an eye, he snatched Grun's sword from its sheath and held it to his throat. Feeling the cold bite of his own blade pressing up against his neck, Grun froze in terror and stared into the young warrior's menacing yellow eyes. "Great heavens! The devil broke his own hands!" one of the soldiers exclaimed in dismay. On hearing this, Grun looked closer and saw the savage's broken hand trembling in his shirt. Clove held the sword firmly. There was no hesitation in his eyes, or remorse in his face. Grun swallowed hard, and said through clenched teeth, "Do it. Kill me. I'll die a knight's death, and you'll die like the dog you are." Unable to handle the thought of the bloodshed about to take place, the princess quickly stepped in and pleaded, "Stop, please! Stop, both of you! I beg you!" Rukith tried to pull her back. "Princess, do not shame him," he pleaded with her, but Creela would not listen, and pulled away from Rukith's counseling arm. "I will not have it! Nobody's going to die for me! If we do return your sword, will you promise to guide us to the oracle?" The Clove did not look at her. "What is it that you need from the oracle?" he asked suspiciously. She can tell us where to find the exiled fire dragon prince," Creela explained. "Please, my father is very sick, and we have very little time. You fought valiantly to help a stranger. Please, I beg you, will you help me?" The Clove listened carefully. There was so much that needed to be answered, but the princess seemed to be sincere enough. "I will," he acknowledged solemnly. The men at arms and the knights exploded in shock and protest. "Princess, no!" Rukith shouted. "Stay back," Grun protested. "He'll just kill us all in our sleep." Krilla boldly stepped forward, took out an ornamental dagger from her belt, and cut the noose from the young warrior's neck. The Clove slowly pulled the sword from the Green Knight's throat. Grun reluctantly tossed the cutlass at his feet. Keeping his injured hand close to his chest, the Clove glared at Grun angrily and spun around and slammed the sword into the side of the tree, sinking it deep into the trunk with a mighty thud. "What the? How dare you!" he exclaimed, which was followed up by a great uproar of laughter from the knights and men-at-arms, seeing the mistreatment of his sword. Grun cried out in alarm and rushed past the Clove, frantically trying to pull the sword from the tree. "You pig!" Grun cursed. "Ha ha 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 ha!" The men guffawed. "It's the legend of the enchanted sword in the tree!" Prompting a whole new round of laughter. Grun whirled around, his face red with rage. "Who said that?" he demanded, but of course no one would answer him. The Clove watched Grun struggle with the sword and smirked as he sheathed his cursed blade, draping the leather strap over his chest. "What is your name?" asked the princess. The Clove wasn't sure what hurt more, the question he could not answer, or his hand. He turned and regarded the richly dressed woman warily. "I was told the oracle would know," he said at last. Krilla frowned and gave the young stranger a perplexed look. "You don't know your name?" she exclaimed in disbelief. "Would you like me to make one up?" he snapped coldly. "I was cursed, and this sword is the only thing that links me to who I was. That is why I must keep it, and that is why I must see the oracle." Krilla's eyes grew wide in shock as he watched the young warrior pop his dislocated thumb back into place. Suddenly there was an uproar of loud cheering as Grun finally managed to pull the sword from out of the tree. "Shut up! Shut up! Get off me, damn it!" Grun snapped as the other knights, who thumped him roughly on the back of the shoulders. Get everybody up! Prepare to move!" he commanded. However, Rukith, the Red Knight, was forced to repeat the order on Grun's behalf. As for now, whatever Grun had to say was a joke in itself. Preston stepped in. "Princess," he began timidly, "what is to become of Shadow and your brother?" he asked. Chapter 7. Bitter Words. You have been listening to The Dragon Scourge by M.R.R. Lopez. If you wish to read along or support the channel, then there's books are in Amazon, both in Kindle and paperback. If you've listened this far, I'm hoping you are having an enjoyable experience, and we'll be pressing on to Chapter 7 on the Dragon Scourge next time.